Okay, so as I said, my name is Bill Sarbuck. I am the chief here within the Office of Apprenticeship and Work-Based Learning. Today, we're here to discuss the Growing Apprenticeship Non-Traditional Sectors Gains Round 2 Technical Assistance Workshop. And we'll get started with our first slide, please. So in March of 2018, Governor Murphy announced the development of the first Office of Apprenticeship in New Jersey, as well as the creation of the New Jersey Apprenticeship Network. Our Office of Apprenticeship here within the New Jersey Department of Labor is a part of that New Jersey Apprenticeship Network, and we work to create programs like this, as well as other programs to enhance
All right.
the.
All right.
Please try to keep
Let me
yourself
go back
muted.
to.
Okay, I muted everybody again, so please try to not unmute yourself while we're doing the presentation, and if you notice that you're unmuted, mute yourself so that it doesn't distract the presentation. Next slide. Our mission here within the New Jersey Apprenticeship Network is for the Office of Apprenticeship to work closely with USDOL and to serve as a one-stop shop for employers, nonprofits, secondary and post-secondary institutions that are interested in developing apprenticeship opportunities. We support new and expand on existing pre-apprenticeship and USDOL registered apprenticeship programs in New Jersey. We establish pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship programs in non-traditional high-growth occupations and sectors. We work to better align secondary, post-secondary, adult education, and occupational training to meet the needs of labor unique to New Jersey and develop career pathways that lead to economically sustainable wages. We work to help apprentices earn college credits, access robust career counseling, and increase diversity and inclusion in apprenticeship programs, and to remove economic barriers to training and upskilling through targeted investments, such as this GAINS program. Next slide. So, what is an apprenticeship program? Registered apprenticeship program means registered and approved by USDOL, which provides classroom and on-the-job training in an occupation recognized as an apprenticeable trade, meets the program standards of enrollment and graduation. This program requires that your participants will all be receiving both classroom and on-the-job training while being employed by that employer from day one. So we'll get into that in a little more detail here shortly, but ultimately that is a key to this program and something that is hopefully clearly understood by anybody and all that applies for the grant. Next slide. The components of a registered apprenticeship program are employer and industry involvement, the related technical instruction classroom training provider, the sponsor or employer, which is who's going to be responsible for the on-the-job learning, an apprentice, and the progressive wage structure for skill gains. A progressive wage structure is an increase in the wages throughout the time frame of the training when the participants become more valuable to the employer. The expectation is as they become more valuable, the employer will increase their salaries, therefore making the ability, giving the participants the ability to stay with this program and continue through the progressive process of completion of the training program and completion of the registered apprenticeship program. Next slide. Benefits to the employer of registered apprenticeship program are reduced turnover, increased worker productivity. It helps to build a company's skill base. It provides a pipeline of skilled workers and a succession plan, and it provides for quality standards of the work in which is being completed by their business. For the apprentices, the benefits are a hands-on career training program. It helps to develop relationships with employers. It increases the future earning potential for that participant, and it provides a national credential upon completion through the United States Department of Labor. That national credential follows them and can be used in any state as it's recognized by all states. Next slide. So there are a couple of models of registered apprenticeship. The first one is our traditional employer model, where the employer is the sponsor. So in this situation, the employer would create a registered apprenticeship program with USDOL. USDOL would assist them in the creation of that program and ensuring that it gets approved. And in this case, they would work with us to provide them with GAINS funding to be able to have the availability of funds to pay for some of the training that was provided to these participants. The employer would then partner with an RTI provider That RTI provider would provide that classroom learning experience. That provider could be a secondary, post-secondary program, a vocational school, online training provider, or in some cases, that employer themselves will provide that training in-house. The other party within a traditional model was obviously the apprentice, who will work with the employer, work for the employer, and work through the program that they get approved with USDOL. Next slide. The other model for registered apprenticeship programs is it's called a workforce intermediary model. In a workforce intermediary model, the sponsor or the organization that gets their program approved by USDOL is not the employer. They are an organization. They could be a union. They could be a training provider. There's lots of different um, uh, I guess, entities that could be considered workforce intermediaries. But ultimately, as the workforce intermediary, they work to get a program approved. They partner with RTI providers. Sometimes they may be the RTI provider, but then from there, they also partner with multiple employers to place these individuals. In our model, these employers would be key, because these employers would have to be willing to hire all of these individuals that they are entering into their registered apprenticeship program from day one, all while they're getting related technical instruction and provided with on-the-job training by that employer. And lastly, as is the same in the other model, the apprentice would be a part of this model. Next slide. So here are some information on where we are as a state when it comes to New Jersey to apprenticeship in New Jersey. So currently there are 9,219 active apprentices in New Jersey, 1,424 total registered apprenticeship programs in the state. And since Governor Murphy took office in January 2018, we've registered 804 new registered apprenticeship programs, which is a 133% statewide increase. In New Jersey, there have been 21,976 new apprentices hired, and there's been 11,029 new industry recognized certifications of completion issued by the U.S. Department of Labor. According to data from the last quarter of 2017, the net total apprentices has increased by approximately 2,436. This is a statewide moving average that includes entrances and exits, and it equates to a 35% net statewide increase in active apprentices currently at this time. Next slide. So now I'm going to get a little more into detail on what the Growing Apprenticeship Non-Traditional Sectors Program is. The mission of the GAINS program is to increase statewide capacity for registered apprenticeship opportunities by offsetting the training and education costs for businesses in high-growth industry clusters. Grant funds can be used for related technical instruction costs and on-the-job wage and reimbursement costs, and it's going to be used towards populations such as the ones that are listed here. These are the targeted populations that we provide within the notice of grant opportunity. It doesn't have to be just these populations, but these would be some of the targeted populations for services that we concentrate here on in New Jersey. They include dislocated workers, DVRS qualified candidates, that's the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation Services, women, members of minority groups, youth, post-secondary students, county vocational school participants, people with disabilities, veterans, recipients of state federal programs, and reentry population. I know it looks redundant to see people with disabilities and to hear DVRS qualified candidates, but they actually are separate candidates. In order to be considered a DVRS candidate, you actually have to go to DVRS and get qualified, pre-qualified as considered a DVRS candidate, where somebody with a disability who hasn't gone to DVRS would also be considered a target population. Next slide. The GAINS program was designed to establish new and expand on existing registered apprenticeship programs in high growth sectors. This is a list of some of the high growth sectors that New Jersey is concentrating on providing services on to within New Jersey. It is not mandatory that your program is within these industries, but these are the industries that the governor's office has recognized as high growth industries here in New Jersey over the last 7 years. Advanced manufacturing, biopharma, life sciences, energy, utilities and infrastructure, retail, hospitality and tourism, financial services and insurance, transportation, logistics and distribution, information technology and cybersecurity, green jobs and renewable energy, healthcare, construction and building trades, public service, educational services, early childhood education, and other STEM related sectors. It is important to note that not all industries here are going to have occupations that are already approved by USDOL. It is important to ensure that the program that you're trying to set up with USDOL is within an occupation that has already been approved. For example, if you were interested in doing solar energy, let's say, currently solar energy is not an industry within USDOL's approved occupations. Solar energy kind of falls under like electrical or construction related services. Um, I don't believe they're interested in expanding that and creating an occupation specifically just in solar energy currently. That could have changed, but ultimately that's something you'd want to talk to USDOL about and get clarification on before you move forward in developing a program that maybe isn't necessarily a good fit for a gains program, specifically because gains requires that you set up a registered apprenticeship program with USDOL. This is some of the stuff you'll want to look into. We'll touch base a little more on how you can look into the types of occupations that are already approved, and we'll also provide you with information on how to find that within the frequently asked questions document that'll be provided to you upon completion of today's training. Funding for the FY25 round two is expected to be $6 million and is obviously contingent upon availability of funds. Contracts are anticipated to be for an 18-month period. During that 18 months, we anticipate you getting your program up and running to where you can provide, you can accept your first apprentices and start having them go through their RTI and OJT training within the first 6 months of those 18 months. That gives you some time to get your programs reviewed and approved by USDOL if they haven't already done so. If you've had them done that, if you've already done that and they're already ready to go, you could start registering and accepting participants from day one of the grant once we provide you with a start date if you are awarded. Next slide. Some highlights of the Notice of Grant Opportunity and key requirements for a successful application are that you must be an eligible entity or an applicant with a New Jersey presence. Um, the full list of eligible entities can be found on page 910 of this Notice of Grant Opportunity. Uh, when we say you have to have a New Jersey presence, that ultimately means that you have to have a physical location here in New Jersey to show that your business is a New Jersey business, New Jersey-based business. The main reasoning for that is that our funding for this program is provided through taxes that are provided to the state of New Jersey. So these programs are being made available to both New Jersey-based businesses as well as New Jersey residents. All participants would have to be New Jersey residents as well. You must start a new registered apprenticeship program or expand upon an existing registered apprenticeship program in an apprenticeable occupation. The full list of occupations can be found at apprenticeship.gov, which is USDOL's website. And that's ultimately where you would go in order to find the list of occupations. If you clicked on, when we provide you with this PowerPoint, you will be able to click on the hyperlink right on this slide as well to get there if you wanted to have a quick and easy way to get to the apprenticeship.gov website and to search for apprenticeable occupations. You must provide evidence of contact with the United States Department of Labor Office of Apprenticeship for program development and registration. We will provide you with a directory of the USDOL apprenticeship training representatives upon completion of this presentation. We are encouraging you to provide details in your proposals about the program development and the USDOL contact so that the panel members will be aware that you've started that process and that they will be knowledgeable of where you are at with that process and what the expected timeline is going to be for you to get it completed. If you do not start the connection and start with reaching out to USDOL prior to your application being submitted, that will be something that is considered by the panel members when they're reviewing your application. And you must provide a New Jersey project. All parties participating in your grant proposal are required to have a New Jersey presence or be a resident of New Jersey. This extends to your partnerships with employers as well as apprentices to be enrolled in the program. Specifically, this is for employers for the purposes of when we're providing on-the-job training funds within the budget. We are not, once again, looking to provide on-the-job training funds to non-New Jersey-based businesses. Main reason being, once again, the tax dollars for this program come from New Jersey tax wages and wage taxes, and ultimately we want to ensure that the funds are going back into those funders from the start. So all your partners, your RTI providers, and your on-the-job training providers should be New Jersey-based organizations. Next slide. Some funding incentives and expectations. When it comes to the on-the-job training wage support, we provide a 50% up to a 50% wage reimbursement, and the wage rate cannot be below $17 an hour at the time of hire. You can do less than 50% wage reimbursement if that is something that you've worked out with the employers, or if you are the employer and you're the one that's applying for the grant, but it can only go up to 50% wage reimbursement. You cannot exceed 40 hours a week for 52 weeks. What this ultimately equates to is that we do not provide on-the-job training dollars for holidays. We do not provide on-the-job training dollars for overtime. Ultimately, we provide it for the hours that are worked in a regular work hour week, and it's only good for up to a 52-week period. So you cannot exceed 52 weeks of on-the-job training wage reimbursement. The maximum OJT reimbursement is $12,000 per apprentice. That $12,000 is the maximum allowable cost per head per apprentice. So I'll get into that in a little more detail here at the end of this slide. And as I said earlier, only regular wages are reimbursable. We do not provide OJT reimbursement for PTO, vacation, sick, holiday pay, or overtime. Payroll records will be required if funded to support wage reimbursement requirements. Ultimately, you'll provide that to us when you're requesting reimbursement, and that those payroll records will be reviewed before approval of payments to reimburse the grantee for those funds. The funding incentives and expectations for related technical instruction support are: it's reimbursable only once the apprentice has been registered with USDOL and has started the class. Wage rate cannot be less than $17 an hour at the time of hire. That's not any different than on the on-the-job training. Ultimately, it's the minimum requirement of our notice of grant opportunities that all participants are entered into your program and hired on those jobs, making minimally $17 an hour. Obviously, it is okay for them to earn more than $17 an hour. Funds can be used to offset RTI related costs. So you don't have to use the funds that are provided for RTI if you have other funding streams to be able to cover that. But ultimately it is an allowable cost within the budget. And front-loaded RTI is not permissible under this grant. To explain to you a little more what a front-loaded RTI is, front-loaded RTI is any classroom training provided to a participant prior to them being hired by the employer and registered with USDOL as a registered apprentice. If you are trying to put them into a training program, you haven't registered them with USDOL yet, or you haven't placed them with an employer yet, that is not allowable within the Gains grant. They must have those two things in place in order to be eligible to utilize these funds for related technical instruction. The expectations for funding and sustainability are that the program, as well as the first class of apprentices, are expected to be registered with the USDOL within the first 6 months of the contract period. As I said earlier, that's an anticipated 18-month contract. And that NJDOL funding is seed money, and that we are requiring you to provide us with a sustainability plan in which outlines the resources that are in place to continue this registered apprenticeship program upon there no longer being availability of funds through the New Jersey Department of Labor. That sustainability plan is something that you should be concentrating on when you're creating it and making sure that you have those plans in place. And lastly, as I said earlier, the maximum allowable cost per head is $12,000 per apprentice. The easiest way for you to figure out how many apprentices you must have accepted in order to be able to be in line with your budget is to finalize your budget, figure out how much funds you need in order to provide your program, divide that number by 12,000, and that'll tell you how many participants you must place. If you cannot place that number of apprentices, you should reduce your budget to make it be within the lines of what you can place and how many participants you can place. For example, if you asked for $120,000, you must place 10 registered apprentices. Next slide. Here are some favorable scoring elements and the pages in which you can find the details on them within the Notice of Grant Opportunity. Large enrollment of individuals to be served or small businesses with fewer than 50 employees. This can be found on page 14. A plan to train new hires over incumbent workers. That can be found on page 12. The recruitment of apprentices from one or more of the targeted populations that are outlined within the NGO, and we went over a little bit earlier in this presentation. That can be found on page 13. Reasonable RTI and OJT costs at a low cost ratio per apprentice. As I said, the maximum is 12,000. If you are under 12,000, that's something that would be a favorable scoring element. That can be found on page 17. The development of a program in one or more of the target industry clusters. We went over those also earlier in the presentation, and that can be found on page 5. These page numbers are specific to the Notice of Grant Opportunity that you should have all read before today's presentation. A cost structure that illustrates the level of non-state funding investments that you have in your project. That can be found on page 16. Provide specific details regarding your program registration status with USDOL, the length of that apprenticeship program, any partnerships that you have for RTI or OJT, the administration of that RTI, the partnerships with employers for the OJT, and a progressive compensation schedule for apprentices. That progressive compensation schedule is the same as the progressive wage structure that we spoke about earlier. That all can be found on page 14 of the Notice of Grant Opportunity. And finally, to provide specific and measurable outcomes that align with the Notice of Grant Opportunity and sponsor the goals and objectives of our program. This is all going to be found on page 14 as well. Next slide. Okay, so with all that information, I know it's a lot. I'm now going to hand it over to Al Nixon, who's going to get more into the application process and to the database registration. So Al, you want to take over?
Yep. Thank you, Bill. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Al Nixon. I am the Gaines Grant Administrator right now, and we're going to go through the application process, and then we'll talk about IGX, the system that it's in afterwards. So next slide, please. Okay, the first steps if you're considering applying is that your authorized official, the AO, must register an IGX. This is referenced on page 18 of the NGO. Then the AO submits a letter of intent via email, and this is referenced on page 19, and there's a template on page 25 that you must use when submitting it through the email. The New Jersey Department of Labor, our office, would approve the AO and IGX and provide access to the application via email after we process the LOI. The organization must obtain a tax clearance certificate from the New Jersey Division of Taxation, referenced on page 21, and detailed instructions are on page 26 of the NGO. And your organization must register with New Jersey Department of Treasury, New Jersey START, as detailed on page 26 of the NGO. And I'd like to emphasize that the last two items, the tax clearance certificate and the NJ START registration process, it may take time to complete. So I do encourage you not to wait, like to start that process till the 11th hour, because it could be a couple weeks possibly if there's problems getting them, and they're required documents to be a complete application. So if you have a tax clearance from a prior grant application, make sure that it's still valid. They're only good for 180 days. So make sure it's valid. Don't submit an old one because we'll have to tell you still go get a new one, and that'll also delay your application. Next slide. Okay. Sorry, my screen kind of. Okay, this is the LOI template. This is the letter that your organization would complete to express an interest in applying for the grant. It has to be signed by your authorized official, and it has to be in this same exact format. If you'll notice on the second line item in the list, it says industry occupation underneath the legal name. That is the industry or occupation that you will be training apprentices in, not the industry or occupation of your company. I just want to clarify that because it's been questioned rather a lot recently. So clarification. Next slide, please. The proposal components, the required documents All of the required information must be submitted through the IGX system. The applicant information, counties to serve, previous funding, your employers or sponsors, gains deliverables, the executive summary, the program narrative, the implementation plan, the program sustainability plan, the tax clearance certificate, the budget summary and details, and then there's a spot for you to upload any miscellaneous attachments that you feel will improve your application. You will add there. These are all either screens in the system, or you'll find in the upload section places for the ones that do not have their own screen. Next slide, please. Okay, in the executive summary, the applicant must describe their organization, including any past New Jersey Department of Labor funding if received, and specify the occupations targeted for apprenticeship, the expected number of apprentices, and the benefits that the apprenticeship program offers to both the organization and the apprentices should be detailed. The summary must also clearly state the career pathways available, along with any certifications, licenses, or college credits the apprentices can earn. The program narrative should demonstrate its alignment with the mission, goals, and objectives of the Gaines NGO. It must show that you have a connection to the one stop if it's applicable, and target populations. You should indicate the anticipated populations for recruitment, and you must include numerical projections. The statement of need, the application must demonstrate, in the statement of need, the application must demonstrate the hiring need and include occupations, job descriptions, and if the occupation is currently on the USDOL approved list. The organizational commitment and capacity. Organizations must demonstrate their commitment and capacity by describing the support, resources, and prior experience in a successful program implementation. Past performance. Provide a description of past grant performance, including outcome data for the most recent year. Applicants with prior unsatisfactory performance may not be funded with 2025 funding. And it's may not as in a possibility, not you may not, like you may not apply. Everybody can apply. It will be reviewed. Next slide, please. An in-depth look at the proposal. Describe how the comprehensive program plan will be implemented. Must include a breakdown of the customer flow and an outline of case management services. The summary of expected outcomes should clearly show your planned occupations, expected timeline for approval of the USDOL, if not already approved, and the number of expected apprentice hires, anticipated salary information, and any business or organization successes that are expected. Outcome timeline. The outcome timeline should describe the key program development benchmarks and milestones, target completion of new program registration, and date of hire for new apprentices. The sustainability plan. It'll describe the strategy for long-term success absent of the grant funding, summarize alternative funding sources and/or strategies to continue activities beyond the contract performance period, as we spoke to earlier. Next slide, please. The evaluation criteria. All applicants are considered new applications, or I'm sorry, all applications are considered new applications and will be evaluated based on quality, comprehensiveness, completeness, accuracy, and alignment with the Notice of Grant Opportunity, or the NGO. This competitive process involves a selection committee applying pre-established criteria to award funding. Awarded applicants will have administrative responsibilities including but not limited to archiving records, completing monthly reports, and attending required meetings. Next slide, please. Okay, in the next couple slides, we're going to go through the IGX system, showing you how to create your account within it if you don't already have one. and what steps that you need to do for the to get to the application. So for those interested in applying, the first steps would include registering the authorized official and IGX system, submitting the letter of intent, and obtaining the necessary tax clearance certifications. The application process involves multiple steps from IGX registration to submission, with detailed instructions provided for each phase. To register an IGX, go to njdol.intelligrants.com and click the new user link under the big blue button that says login. Complete the registration information, and on the very bottom of the registration page, it'll be free-form text for you to type the word GAINS, GAINS. This will allow us to find a registration link for the FY Round 2 GAINS application in IGX and link it to your registration. If you have had prior grants in the past, you may see them on your dashboard, but until the GAINS fiscal 25 round 2 is linked to you, you will not have access to it. Once you're registered, you must send your LOI to the DOL apprenticeship unit at dol.nj.gov so we can allow you access to the application. When we have completed processing your LOI, we will email you to let you know that you have access to the application in IGX, and that's what I was speaking to. You have to actually have the LOI submitted, and I'll process it before you will see it in the system. Just because you registered does not mean you have access to it. Next slide, please. Once your LOI is processed, we will email you that the access is granted. You will navigate to the IGX login page at njdol.intelligrants.com and then enter your credentials and select login. Next slide. On your dashboard, under the My Opportunities section, if you click Filter, it's going to open up a box to be able to search for your application to complete. Next slide. When the filter for the search opens, for provider, select New Jersey Department of Labor and Workforce Development, NJDOL, from the drop-down menu. And in the name box, type the word GAINS and then hit search. The GAINS grant application will appear in My Opportunities. You will click the hyperlink to start the application. It actually initiates the application. That way it'll go to your dashboard if you're not ready to complete it at that time. Next slide, please. When opening the application for the first time, you're going to see a pop-up box describing the grant application that you are applying for. Review the grant program description and agreement language. To proceed with the application, select I agree. Take note that after agreeing, if at any time you need to leave and come back to work on the application pages, you can access your application by visiting the home page and selecting the application from under in the section My Tasks. Next page, please. After selecting I agree, you'll be brought to the landing page for your grant application. All of the pages that need to be completed will be listed on the left-hand side in the light blue, located under GAINS application in the dark blue. As you go through the application, you will have the ability to navigate to different pages of the application by clicking the desired page on the left menu, or from within one page to go to the next if it's available that way. You do not need to complete the application completely at one time. You may save sections that you have completed and return at a later time to finish the application. Every page that you complete on the application will have a save button on the top right-hand side of the screen for you. Be sure that after you complete that page, you hit save. If you navigate out of it, it's going to ask you, are you sure you want to navigate without saving? You want to make sure you save your page or you're going to have to re-enter it again. Next slide, please. To submit the application, after you've completed all the required pages, you'll notice that there will be little check marks and boxes next to each of the required pages showing that they've been completed. So to submit the application, please note that the AO will only be able to submit the application. Somebody who's an agency administrator will be able to go in and complete it, but the AO has to be the one to submit it. When you're ready to submit your application, use the navigation panel on the left-hand side to the section labeled Status Options. That's in dark blue. Then select Application Submitted to begin the submission process. Please note that if a document validation page appears, that means that there are errors that need to be completed and corrected before the application can be submitted. Revisit them pages with the errors and make the necessary revisions. Then try the submission again. After selecting application submitted, a box will appear if there are no errors, asking you to confirm that you would like to submit the application. Click OK to finish the submission. Then you can hit cancel to exit if you would like to review something on the application before you submit. Once the application is submitted, if it's still prior to the deadline of April 11th and you wish to make any modifications, you must email us at the apprenticeship unit at dol.nj.gov for us to allow you access to the application. Under no circumstances should you select cancel application in the status options. This will cancel your application, not allow you to edit it. So unless you wish to withdraw your application, do not hit cancel. Email us and we can set the status back so you can make edits to it. Next slide, please. Okay, the important dates. They're critical deadlines, and while the submission are the letter of intent and the full application. The letter of intent is due by April 4th, 2025 at noon, 12 p.m. The complete application must be submitted no later than April 11th, 2025 at noon. It's 12 p.m. Final decisions on awards will be communicated approximately 45 days following the panel review. I want to stress that we do not expect to extend either of these deadlines. You must have both of the forms submitted to us by noon on the deadline date that it says. If you are in the middle of doing the application and you go to submit it after 12 o'clock, it will not submit. Please be diligent to get it done ahead of time so you're not trying to get it in at the 11th hour, because sometimes technology is not our best friend and there are problems. Next slide. Okay, so our contact information. We are the Office of Apprenticeship and Work-Based Learning. Our director is James Manning. His contact information is listed here. Our chief of the Apprenticeship and Work-Based Learning Unit is Bill Sarbuck. He's on this call with us. He'll be taking the questions and answers next. His information is there. And the general inquiries can be directed to the Apprenticeship Unit at dol.nj.gov. I encourage you, if you have any questions regarding anything to do with the grants in our office, to use the Apprenticeship Unit general email. That email is sent to all of us. So if one particular person is out that day, you may still be able to get an answer from somebody else in the unit. So I strongly suggest you use that email, the Apprenticeship Unit, because it goes to all of us. Next slide. And questions. And for questions, I'm going to pass it off back to Bill, and he'll be able to answer questions for you.
Thanks, Al. I appreciate all the information. So a couple pieces before we get into the Q&A. I know this is a lot of information. We give you all of this hoping that it'll be helpful, but sometimes it overwhelms us. Don't allow any of this to overwhelm you. Al just went over a lot of stuff when it comes to the IGX process. Initially, what you need to do is read the notice of grant opportunity, get a better understanding of exactly what it is we're asking for. Provide us with that letter of intent. You're emailing that to the apprenticeship unit at dol.nj.gov email address that you see right here on the screen. The letter of intent does not need to include anything more than what's on the template that you saw here during this presentation. That template is also an addendum and a part of our notice of grant opportunity. Complete that, submit it to our apprenticeship unit at dol.nj.gov email address. Make sure you're registered in the IGX database if you're not already. We'll give you access to the application, and upon giving you access, we'll also email you a user guide on how to complete the application within the IGX database. So a lot of the details that Al just went over are included step by step within that user guide. So that user guide will help you to complete the application and ensure that you're not missing any data that you need to provide us. The application itself also has a lot of checks and balances built into it to try and help you ensure that you're not missing and leaving things out that are mandatory. Most importantly, what you should be concentrating on is the details of the application that you submit to us. Make sure that application clearly articulates exactly what it is you're trying to accomplish, provides us with all the details necessary to understand from start to finish exactly what your participants are going to receive, when they're going to receive it, and how they're going to receive it. And ultimately, at the end of the day, that application clearly articulates to the reader what it is that's going to benefit, how that program is going to benefit both industry and the participants as a whole. Those pieces of information are going to make your application stronger and ultimately allow for you to have a better consideration for grant funding. At the end of the day, I do anticipate us having a large number of applicants. So this is going to be a competitive process. Um, if you apply and you do not put your strongest and best foot forward, and you're ultimately not putting the effort necessary into your application, it will be noticeable by the panel members and it will negatively impact your ability to receive funding. So please put as much effort as you can. If you feel that you're not going to be able to put into this application the amount of effort necessary in order to be considered for funding, there will be funding again in the future, and it might be in your best interest to wait and apply in the future. Sometimes that is what's best for your organization. It really is up to you to decide that. At the end of the day, though, we look forward to receiving your applications, reviewing your applications, and hopefully partnering with many of you during this round 2 of FY25. So first things first, let me get into some of the questions that are in the chat. And then after that, I will open it up to allow for you guys to unmute yourselves if you wish, and ask questions verbally if you're not able to enter them in the chat. If you can enter them into the chat, that's always best because it allows me to kind of read out the question and everybody knows what you're looking for. First question we had in chat was, can the training provider be from out of state? So the training provider with USDOL can be anywhere because USDOL ultimately approves your program. But what I would tell you is that we are looking for our funding, any funding that's being used from this grant, to go towards both employers that are within New Jersey as well as training providers that are in New Jersey. Could you submit an application where your training provider might be an online source? Of course you can. I'm not saying that would negatively impact your ability to be considered for funding, but ultimately it is something that will be looked at by panel members and could negatively, I don't want to call it negatively, but it could be considered in whether or not your application was going to be funded. There is no requirement necessarily. Next question. We are a nonprofit, community-based organization that would apply as a workforce intermediary. What documents or items fulfill requirement to showcase a New Jersey presence? So there aren't any specific documents that you would provide to us. It's an address or a physical location within New Jersey that would provide us with proof of a New Jersey presence. That's the best way to explain that. I don't think I have any additional questions in the chat. I do see we have one hand raised. Haley, if you want to unmute yourself and ask your question, please feel free to.
Thank you. I asked a question in regards to the training provider. Ours is located in Florida, but they will be bringing all of the required, physical hands-on that's needed for the RTI and for the on-the-job learning to support. So if they are in another state, but they're willing to travel to do all training in state of New Jersey, is that something you would want us to very much communicate in the narrative? And would that still, in a sense, not necessarily hurt, but not be the most preferred training provider to move forward with? That's my full question.
What it comes down to is we're looking to provide funding that comes from that we're looking to provide the funding that this program is going to be given to those who have supported the fund that creates these funds, if that makes sense. So, for example, if we were using federal dollars for this program, it would make less sense for us to be considering just New Jersey-based employers or New Jersey-based residents, because ultimately, at the end of the day, we're looking to benefit all people of the United States based on the money being federal funding. Because it's New Jersey state funding that's being utilized for this grant, we do try to concentrate our funds that are being utilized towards New Jersey-based organizations, businesses, and residents. So I would say that it is allowable. All of what you're saying is allowable. If you want to apply that way, it could be something that a panel member considers when they're looking at your application. When it comes to employment, though, the expectation is that they have to be employed still with a New Jersey-based employer, and they have to be a New Jersey resident in order to qualify. We had a couple of questions come into chat. What types of costs are reimbursable under the GAINS program? So the expectation of GAINS is that the majority of your funds are going to be to fund the training. So both the related technical instruction, which would be the classroom training, as well as the on-the-job training, which would be the funds that are reimbursable at a 50% rate to employers. That would be what the expectation of the majority of your funds would be going towards. Ultimately, beyond that, there is an allowance for there to be some level of supportive services, but ultimately, I would tell you that it's not important to concentrate too heavily on that, mainly because the expectation is that your participants are all going to be receiving an income during the time frame that they're in this program. They should be earning minimally $17 an hour. There is an allowance for up to 10% admin costs. So if you were asking for $120,000, up to 10% of that 120,000 could be used towards admin. But ultimately, there is no no list of things that we are allowing and not allowing beyond the fact that we try to concentrate on not purchasing any large equipment with our funds. Main reason being the Department of is not interested in being an owner in let's say a huge welding machine that was being purchased with the funding, and ultimately any funding that is used through these programs becomes ownership of the state. We also do not allow for the purchases of computers or laptops currently, unless there is some level of connection to the training and the job that they'll be doing where it could possibly be considered, but that's ultimately something that would be a case by case basis. And we also do not look to really cover costs like rent, stuff like that. Main reason being, once again, if you don't have a physical location already for these types of programs, the likelihood of the success of them in the future, that sustainability is really not there. So we tend to try to stay away from those types of expenses. What is the maximum wage reimbursement per apprentice, and what are the restrictions? I've already provided that information multiple times, but the maximum allowable cost per participant is $12,000. That is also the maximum allowable wage reimbursement per apprentice. There is ultimately, if you were to provide $12,000 worth of wage reimbursement per apprentice, then that would be in your entire budget. You wouldn't have anything else budgeted within your budget. How can funds be used for related technical instruction? The funds can be used to pay for that related technical instruction. So if you're paying instructors and you're going to provide the training yourself, it could cover that. If you're paying for all the equipment and training needs, then that's covered as well. Or if you're paying an actual provider to provide that related technical instruction, and they charge a per student cost, it could cover it that way. It all depends on the types of related technical instruction and who's providing that related technical instruction. If an existing RA wants to apply for funding to expand their current program, do they have to increase the number of apprentices trained, or can they merely add more training to the current program? So, Jim, the expectation of a program that's going to be GAINS funded is that we're going to increase the number of registered apprentices. So if you're not looking to add registered apprentices, this is not necessarily a good fit for your program. you can use what we call incumbent workers, which would be employees who are already employed by a business, but it would be the expectation would be that they would be going into a registered apprenticeship program after receipt of the funds, and that registered apprenticeship program would be preparing them for a better job, a more fulfilling career. The registered apprenticeship program, the registered apprentices have to be registered after the date of the start of the contract. So if they were already registered apprentices, they were registered prior to the start of our contract, they wouldn't be eligible to be considered for our grant. Jones, so using 10% or less to fund the part-time salary of an apprentice coordinator would be acceptable. Sure. I mean, technically, if anything that's considered administrative costs for your grant would be acceptable to utilize that 10% on. I see I have another hand up, Jim. If you want to unmute yourself, please feel free to do so and ask your question.
Yeah, this is just a follow-up to the question I asked in the chat.
Okay.
So let's say, I'm just giving hypothetical numbers. Let's say you train 100 apprentices a year now, and you propose an expansion, and you're going to increase the number to 140, let's say. So then your cost per apprentice would be based on the additional apprentices over what you do now, right? In other words, it would be 40 times whatever the maximum is. Is that right?
I would imagine so. I mean, I can't specifically speak to your program, but ultimately, if any apprentices that you're going to add post receipt of the grant could be considered for the program.
Okay.
The 40 would make sense if it was going to increase your ability to have apprentices within your program, then it would make sense to do what you're saying. I just can't specifically tell you what to do. You know what I mean? With an application.
Right. Okay. Can I ask one other question about the
Of course.
funding stuff? And that is, no big equipment. I understand that. Is there like a definition of what big equipment is, like how much money it costs or something like that? Is there, and I know you said no laptops, but sometimes there are like tools and stuff that go with apprenticeships.
Mhm.
Is that acceptable to put funding in the grant for that?
Yes, I would say tools are sometimes acceptable as long as the tools are not um, uh, I don't want to put a specific number on it because ultimately there is some subjectivity to it upon approval of your program. I don't know that you should also necessarily be concentrating too heavily on this kind of stuff at application time. This is something that would be reviewed if an award was made, and if something wasn't going to be allowable, we could work through that before contract is put in place. I would say your best bet is to include anything that you see as a need and to go from there. Ultimately, if it's not allowable, it would have to be funds that are reallocated to something else. It could negatively affect your budget scoring within your application, but the budget scoring is a small portion of the scoring. You can find within the notice of grant opportunity how much is covered there, and make a decision on what it is you want to include. As I said earlier, there's lots of things to take into consideration when you're putting your application together. Some of them are some of those things I went over earlier that were key components to make your application more enticing to the reader. One of those was to have a lower cost per participant. Um, so I think that's something to take into consideration. Maybe not including tools is a better idea in your application, but that's up to you to decide as the applicant. And I think it really comes down to looking at your application, your entire application, and deciding where and what you should include within it and how you should put that application in to provide the readers with the best opportunity at understanding where your program can be successful and how your program will be successful.
Thank you.
No problem. I see another question. Will there be a link to the copy of this seminar. So upon completion of the training, we're going to email everybody who registered to attend today's session. That will include the PowerPoint that we just did. It'll include a frequently asked questions document. That frequently asked questions document will also have a link to a recording of the session, so you'll be able to get that as well. We'll provide you with contact information for USDOL in case you needed to reach out to them for anything. We'll provide you with a copy of the Notice of Grant Opportunity. And ultimately, we'll also provide you with the email address here with the apprenticeship unit at dol.nj.gov so that you'll know where to reach out to and who to contact. All that stuff will be provided to you upon completion of the presentation. You'll probably get it within 24 to 48 hours. It all depends on how long it takes our DIT department to add this recording to YouTube. Usually they do it pretty quickly, but I usually try to give my team 48 hours to get it out to you just in case they run into issues. What are some examples of successful registered apprenticeship programs in non-traditional sectors? I think some of that is going to come down to your own research, and I think that it is necessary that you do some of your own research in order to make this your program successful. But I would say to you that some of our most successful registered apprenticeship programs since the Gaines inception have been in the healthcare fields. We've also done a decent amount recently in teacher, K through 12 teacher apprenticeship, more recently. I think that those are some good examples, and you could look into seeing what's out there on them. But ultimately, there are lots of examples of successful registered apprenticeship programs, and there's been a huge concentration across the nation in the expansion to non-traditional sectors. And traditionally, everybody thinks of registered apprenticeship as union-based construction trades. I would tell you that, in my time being with the unit and in the last, 5 fiscal years of funding that we've provided through our Gains program, we've provided a handful of grants to the to those traditional construction related unions, very small number. The majority of our grants have gone to non-traditional programs and the creation of those programs, and has seen a huge increase in the healthcare field specifically.
Well, I think you skipped a question above Yasmin Clark's, the 10% questions.
No, I did that one.
Okay.
Right? Oh no. So other than the 10% admin cost, is it allowable to add in a management cost for apprentice activity and or the related costs associated with the program? It is allowable, Matt, but I would suggest to you that you make that cost minimal. Like I said, we're looking to offset the costs that are specifically related to the related technical instruction and on-the-job training. Those are where the majority of your costs should be going towards, and ultimately that will positively affect your ability to be considered for funding. Thank you, Lauren. I just did that one. Do we have to submit the program to the USDOL for approval before submitting an IGX? No, you do not have to have your program already reviewed and approved by USDOL before you submit your application, but you should have had contact with them. You should have started the process, and you should have a good understanding of timeline on how long it's going to take to get that program up and running. Is there flexibility with the amount of hours the apprentice works per week? For example, if we engage youth who may still be in high school, they would not work or train 40 hours per week. Are youth also required to earn $17 an hour, or is there flexibility to start them at a lower wage? So I'll take this in parts. First things first, the requirement of USDOL is that that a registered apprentice is receiving 144 hours of related technical instruction and 2,000 hours of on-the-job training per year. And there's a minimal requirement of a 12-month program in order to be accepted by USDOL. So 2,000 hours, when you do the math over a 52-week, it works out to a little over 38 hours a week. So that's something that you'd have to work out with USDOL. If USDOL is willing to allow for there to be less hours, depending on the occupation that they're in, depending on the situation that exists specifically with the population that you're serving, and placing into these registered apprenticeships, as long as USDOL approves it, we would be willing to approve it as well. As far as the $17 per hour, that is not something we're flexible with. First of all, minimum wage here in New Jersey is practically $15.50 an hour. So, it's really not a huge increase from minimum wage to be at $17 an hour. And the expectation is that the employer is going to be taking these individuals on in a position that they're going to be skilled employees upon completion of the registered apprenticeship program. Now, it's understood that they don't have all those skills up front, but the expectation is they'll be receiving some subsidy to cover some of that and offset some of those costs through the on-the-job wage reimbursement that we provide through these grants. So the $17 per hour would be something that we would expect the participants to receive. DOL website for registration is currently shut down. So you don't register for your registered apprenticeship through their website. You're going to register with them with one of the apprenticeship representatives that will provide you their contact information. So I would say, reach out to them and talk to them about the process. And I can't specifically speak to any of their database issues if they're having any. I'm not saying that they aren't because they haven't informed me of anything, but reach out to whoever your ATR is. Like I said, we're going to provide you with a sheet that provides you contact information based on the county that you reside. So you look up the county and where your program is residing. You contact that ATR and they could answer any of those questions on how long it will take you to get your program registered and started. Piggybacking on of the successful registered apprenticeship programs in non-traditional sectors, would the advanced medical device dental manufacturing sector be high on the list of consideration? And what are you looking for in terms of long-term strategy for a new program in this sector? So I can't specifically tell you which sectors I've told you the industry sectors that we're concentrating on. Healthcare specifically is one of them. And ultimately so is manufacturing. So some of those things could fall, your occupation that you're specifically looking to place individuals in could fall into one of those. But I can't speak to the industry specifically. That's what USDOL works with you on when you're trying to get your program up and running with them. So I would suggest that you speak with USDOL in reference to the occupation that you're interested in placing individuals in and training them in, and they can give you a better understanding of that. To clarify, what key elements should be considered when developing a long-term strategic plan for a new program in this specialized sector? The key elements are pretty simple. That there's a need for this training in the industry, and that you have employers that are willing to hire these individuals. Those are the key elements. Without those key elements, there is no long-term plan because you don't ultimately have a need for the program, and the long-term plan is not something that's sustainable without there being employers that are willing to hire these individuals. So those are the key things, the key elements that you'd want to start with when you're trying to develop your plan. From there, it's really up to you to develop your plan. It's not really my place to tell everybody how to develop their programs, specifically because I'm not an expert in your industry. First of all, second of all, I'm the provider of the funding, and our expectation is that you're going to come up with the plan on how to make your program successful. And I would like to be able to provide you with the funding in order to be able to do so. So hopefully you can come up with that plan and provide it to us within your application. Do we need letters from employers to justify need? It would definitely be a good idea. Anytime you can provide employer commitments, it will help your applications. Those commitment letters are something that does get considered by panel members, especially if you're an intermediary. It'll also allow for them to better understand how your program is going to run. So as you heard me say throughout this presentation, we do not allow for front-loaded RTI. Part of that front-loaded RTI consideration is whether or not you have employers that are hiring these individuals from day one. If you can show proof of that by having these letters from commitment letters from employers, that will be something that will eliminate any concerns that maybe specifically relate to the front-loaded RTI. So it's definitely a good idea. All right, we're already registered with the DOL, so that makes that's half of the process for you guys. The rest is now putting your application together. I think I just want to get a better idea of what kind of strategy would be favored, since it is the first time we have this program in New Jersey. So, Michelle, I don't know a better way to say this other than the best strategy is exactly what it is you're going to do in order to both recruit your participants, train your participants, and place your participants. All of those pieces are going to be and providing us with a timeline and a process for all those things to occur that clearly is understandable and that you can articulate in a way that will be easy to understand by a reader and a panel member. I think that, beyond that, for me to give you additional information would be almost kind of trying to help you write your application, and I can't really provide you more than that. Commitment letters from sponsorship agreements, what is the difference? I'm not quite following that question. So we grant funds and gains to the sponsor. So the sponsoring agency is the agency who gets their program approved through USDOL here in New Jersey. So your agreements with employers on that sponsorship, because you as an intermediary would then have employers who sign on to your agreements. Those letters are just something that prove to USDOL that they are willing to hire your participants. What I'm talking about is a commitment to hiring participants that are specifically going to be added through this Gains grant. So reaching out to employers, telling them about this opportunity for Gains funding, and informing them of time frames for it and the occupations, that you're looking to get people trained in. If they were to commit to hiring people from this specific program, this Gains program, that would be a very good help to your application. As far as your documents that need to be filled out with USDOL for an employer to be considered an employer for your program, that's not what I'm talking about. Those are official documents that are necessary with USDOL for your program. That we are not attached to USDOL. We're separate from them. Say 3 companies with all different FEIN numbers are sister companies under one larger entity. Will these employers be viewed as different employers or one? Trying to gauge if the letters from these companies will suffice the need to place new hires with different companies. Haley, I don't know that. I think you're overthinking it. What I'm talking about, I don't need you to provide me FEIN numbers for the companies necessarily. It's not mandatory up front. All I'm looking for currently really is for you to provide me with some understanding of who you're going to place these individuals with, and if you can provide some type of a commitment from them that shows that they're willing to hire a certain number, that would be helpful. But ultimately, those are getting into the weeds on, they're one employer, but they have multiple entities. If they're hiring individuals, I don't care if it's one employer or 30 employers. If they're willing to hire people, that's what matters, I think. What are we expected to submit on the all right, so on the so in IGX is just a database. Are we submitting the program curriculum in IGX or to the USDOL? So if you read the notice of grant opportunity, the notice of grant opportunity tells you specifically what you need to provide us with. What you have to work out with USDOL is the development of a registered apprenticeship program. If you don't quite understand any of this, this is probably not a good grant program for you. There's a big difference between training programs that are funded through the Department of Labor and registered apprenticeship models like what we're providing here. A lot of times people get confused by the differences. The regular training programs that we provide funding for through the Department of Labor, in a lot of cases, in many cases, don't have very many requirements. They don't require you to have a program approved by anybody external. Sometimes they might require you to be on the ETPL list, but that may be the extent of it. In this case, USDOL is the approver of registered apprenticeship programs here in New Jersey. You have to work with them in order to get that registered apprenticeship program approved. They'll tell you what they need. Ultimately, if you want a grant from the Department of Labor in order to help place individuals into that registered apprenticeship program. Once you get it approved by USDOL, then Gaines would help with funding that. Gaines requires you to provide an application that gives a narrative, it gives implementation plan, it gives expectations of a budget. It provides us with a sustainability plan. There are a lot of documents that are included within the notice of grant opportunity, as well as things that we just went over during this technical assistance workshop that you have to provide details on. If you go back and look through the slideshow, you'll see some of the documents that you need to provide us. If you read the notice of grant opportunity, you'll also see some information on what it is you'll have to provide us. Ultimately, all of that information is there, as well as, once we give you access to the application, you'll see on the pages within the application that you need to complete what it is that you need to provide us with. So I think that that's all pieces of information that I think you should take a look into and read the notice of grant opportunity clearly, so that you hopefully understand all of that. Yes, Michelle, no worries. That's fine. Like I said, I just want to make sure, on one end, I have to be careful to provide you guys with enough information to help guide you, but I can't tell you what to write in your application. I don't want to inform you in any way, because ultimately that just confuses you and slows you down. On the other hand, I want to make sure that you understand what we're looking for and what our expectations are here with the New Jersey Department of Labor with this grant opportunity. So, I don't see any other questions. Did anybody else want to unmute themselves and ask any questions? If anybody's still got anything they want to put in the chat, I'm not looking to rush anybody out of here. I just want to make sure. Okay.
I have a quick question.
Okay, sure.
So, say you went through round one and it didn't get approved and we were sent back critiques and those changes are made. Does the entire application need to be written, or just the changes submitted with the old application?
So it doesn't necessarily have to be rewritten. It does have to be re-uploaded. If it's the uploaded documents, your budget would have to be redone. The application itself is a new application, so you'll have to complete the new application, but in a lot of cases you'll just be uploading documents that you've already created with the updates that you want to add to it.
Perfect. And last question. So say this grant is awarded, is the time frame when you can hire the new hires once you receive the award and then the program can begin, or can these programs begin prior to an award?
They have, yeah, so you're this is what you heard me say earlier to a gentleman's question about having registered apprentices who were already registered apprentices within their program. They have to be accepted into your registered apprenticeship program after the start date of the grant program. It's expected that this program here, this round 2 of Gaines, is going to probably start somewhere around June 15th.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. As I said earlier, that start date of June 15th will run for an 18-month period. So it'll start around June 15th and it'll end around December 14th of 2026. Any other questions? Okay, I don't see any additional questions in the chat. I also don't see anybody unmuting or speaking up. So with that, I want to thank everybody for attending today's technical assistance workshop. As I said earlier, we'll get out the recordings along with all of the documentation here in the next 24 to 48 hours. If any questions come up, please feel free to reach out to us at the apprenticeship unit at dol.nj.gov. I will be honest, I cannot be as forthcoming with my information on an individual case-by-case basis as I was able to be here during this technical assistance workshop, mainly because I'm not providing that information to a group of individuals. I'm providing it to just you. this gets placed on a public forum where it could be seen by the public, so I'm able to answer questions a little more forthcoming here. But please feel free to ask the questions, and if we can answer them, we'll try our best. Other than that, thank you again for listening and asking very good questions. We look forward to seeing your applications here in the next few weeks, and good luck with the process. Take care, everybody. Have a good day.